If you don't recognize this picture of the little girl behind me, that's okay. I'm pretty sure you are more than familiar with her legacy. This is Amber Hagerman, and what happened to her led directly to what is known as Amber Alerts. Thank you for joining me on today's Brain Scratch, everyone. It's me, John Lorden. I hope you had a nice week, and we are going to look into this very important and still unsolved case. And when you start looking into this case, you'll quickly realize that a central figure in it, in terms of strength and resilience, is really Amber's mother, Donna, and you might even say her younger brother, who certainly struggled throughout trying to cope with losing his sister, is also a pillar of strength in this. But her mother, it's really such a heartbreaking story right from the start. This is a woman that left what seemed like an abusive situation with her husband and was living on welfare, trying to raise her two children. Only a few years after that, this tragedy strikes in terms of what happened to Amber. But somehow this woman perseveres, even works together with her ex-husband to help put changes into effect that really make this world a safer place for many, many children out there. It's a pretty amazing story in that aspect, but it's still tragic nonetheless. I also have to give a big thank you to a researcher that helped me on this case, Amanda Denton. Thank you so much for your work on this, Amanda. With all that being said, let's jump in and see what we can learn about Amber Hagerman. Starting at Wikipedia with what I always consider the most popular version of the story. Unfortunately, Amber doesn't have a page of her own. She becomes a section within the Amber Alert page. But to start with, an Amber Alert originated in the United States in 1996. Amber is officially a backronym for America's Missing Broadcast Emergency Response, but was named after Amber Hagerman, a 9-year-old was abducted and murdered in Arlington, Texas in 1996. In the United States, Amber Alerts are distributed via commercial radio stations, internet radio, satellite radio, television stations, and cable TV. The alerts are also issued via email, electronic traffic condition signs, electronic billboards, wireless SMS text messages. They've also recently teamed up with Google, Bing, and Facebook for getting information out on the internet. And we did cover this on Johnny Vlogs Live, but just to go over it again, there is specific activation criteria for being able to issue an Amber Alert. Law enforcement must confirm that an abduction has taken place. The child must be at risk of serious injury or death. There must be sufficient descriptive information of the child, the captor, or the captor's vehicle to issue an alert, and the child must be under 18 years of age. This also notes that many law enforcement agencies have not used criteria number 2, that the children must be at risk of serious injury or death. And I think I kind of agree with that, because that could be somewhat of a subjective call. I mean, and at that point you have law enforcement agencies that are trying to dictate, well, yeah, we know this kid was abducted, but are they really going to be harmed? It does not seem fair to even make them have to make that call. So I kind of agree that they should probably drop out that second criteria. In Canada, the RCMP also has a similar system, and the requirements are nearly identical. And also worth noting, it has been expanding internationally. The Australian state of Queensland implemented a version of the Amber Alerts in May 2005. Currently, there are alert systems active in 18 European countries. So certainly something that has changed the world. But how did this all come about? Here we have the section about Amber Hagerman. On January 13th, 1996, 9-year-old Amber Renee Hagerman was abducted while riding her bike in Arlington, Texas. A neighbor who witnessed the abduction called police, and Amber's brother Ricky went home to tell his mother and grandparents what happened. That's a little bit of an oversimplification of the events, but we'll get into more detail here in a moment. 4 days after the abduction, near midnight, her body was found in a creek behind an apartment complex with cut wounds to her neck. The site of the discovery was less than 5 miles from where she went missing. There are no suspects to her abduction and homicide. Now I want to jump over to the notes that were sent to me by Amanda Denton, and we will get certainly a lot more detail. All the sources for the information that Amanda has compiled are going to be in the description box below. I've also done additional research on top of that you're going to find in the description box as well. There are several very good videos. One in particular we'll talk about at the end of this video. But there's a lot of information out there. Unfortunately, when you try to search for Amber Hagerman nowadays, you are seeing numerous references to other cases because they're talking about cases where people have used an Amber Alert and then they go to explain that happened because of what happened to Amber Hagerman. So looking for information specifically for her investigation, I would suggest you Google search on Amber Hagerman murder or Amber Hagerman investigation, and the news results unfortunately don't work very well because there's so many mentions of her that aren't really related directly to her case. But the regular Google results should get you to most of the current media. And of course, this happened over 21 years ago now. At the 20th anniversary of this occurring, there was a lot of media that kicked up around then. We'll touch on what they were discussing at that point, but there's certainly a lot to dive into. Amber Hagerman was born Amber Renee Hagerman on November 25th, 1986 in Arlington, Texas, to Donna Norris and Richard Hagerman. She was a Brownie in the Girl Scouts, loved Barbie, also loved Pocahontas, and was an older sister. Her little brother Ricky was 4 years younger than her. There is now a monument placed near the site where Amber was kidnapped. It's a tree that's named Amber's Tree next to an angel statue that an Arlington man built. Now we're going to jump into the timeline and accompanying information. January 13th, 1996, Amber and her family arrived at her grandparents' house around 3 p.m. Around 3:10, Amber and her 5-year-old brother Ricky asked if they could ride bikes. Mother Donna said yes, but to only circle the block a few times and come right back. Their grandparents lived on Highland Drive. They went further and went to the abandoned Winn-Dixie grocery store parking lot off of Abram Street, a few blocks from the old GM plant. And apparently behind this Winn-Dixie grocery store was a loading ramp, and the kids were riding their bikes down the loading ramp over and over. That's why they wanted to stay in that area. Ricky got worried that they weren't listening to what they were told. He actually left to go back to the grandparents' house, leaving Amber alone at the loading ramp of the abandoned grocery store. Around 3:18 p.m., a witness hears Amber's screams, sees the abduction, and immediately calls 911. He also noticed a truck watching the kids from a nearby laundromat. The witness, Jim Kevill, stated in an interview, quote, "I saw her riding up and down the vacant lot. She was by herself. I saw this pickup truck. He pulled up, jumped out, and grabbed her. When she screamed, I figured the police ought to know about it, so I called them. I wish I had known more. I'd done all I could do. The man was either white or Hispanic, not very big, but very fast. His truck was dark, but it was too far for me to get much more details. The man went west after leaving the parking lot." And unfortunately, this is probably the best description of events that we have, and we really, even after all the research that I've done on this case, I haven't found any new details to this description. A lot of people are assuming the truck was black, but according to his quote, it was dark. There is also some information that it seemed to be an American-made truck, either late 80s or early 90s. I'm not sure if that came out of subsequent interviews with him. But that is pretty much all we know about the culprit. Meanwhile, back at the grandparents' house, Ricky was told by his grandfather to go back and get Amber. A few minutes later, Ricky returned and said that she wasn't there. Amber's grandfather gets in his truck and rushes to the grocery store parking lot and finds the police already there. Her grandfather sees the bike and says, "That's my granddaughter's bicycle." The cops then tell him about the abduction. January 13th through the 17th, the search for Amber starts with help from citizens all over the Arlington, Dallas, and Fort Worth areas. The FBI also gets involved. In one of the videos that you'll find in the description box below, you can hear the family talk about all the support that they received from the community. The community really rallied around trying to find this girl. They literally had posters and printed that night, and we're putting them up all over, starting on the day that she actually disappeared. So very, very quick movement from the community. January 17th, 1996, between 5 and 7 p.m., a little girl's body was found just a few miles from the kidnapping location, lying naked in the bottom of a creek bed behind the Forest Hill apartment complex by a man walking his dog. Her throat was cut. She had bruises all over her body. Police identified the body as Amber's by matching a thumbprint from a school safety card. The only piece of clothing that was still on her was one sock, and the man that actually found her was also a resident of that apartment building. It's believed that the kidnapper kept her alive for 2 days before killing her and putting her in the creek where she was discovered. The Arlington police and the FBI launch the Amber Hagerman Task Force. And a quick note about that creek, where she was found, there was a heavy rain the day before that, so there is some question about where she was found, if she had drifted to that spot or if she was actually put in at that spot. I believe the authorities think that she drifted to that spot, and they're not exactly sure of the location where she was put in to the creek. January 18th, 1996, Oak Farms offers a $10,000 reward to anyone with information leading to the arrest and conviction of the killer. And I can tell you from recent articles I've seen, apparently Oak Farms is still offering that reward money. It has also been contributed to by others. It is now up to $75,000. October 1996, the Amber Alert is launched in Texas. 1996 through 1999, the search for her killer continues, but goes cold due to lack of evidence. Due to spending more than $1 million on the task force, it is disbanded, although the search has never ended. January 1st, 2001, Amber Alert goes national. November 2005, Amber Alert becomes an official law. January 1st, 2013, current Amber Alerts are able to be sent to cell phones. And as of 2017, the Arlington Police and the FBI have investigated over 5,000 leads. I've actually seen newer information on that is bouncing between 7,000 to 8,000 leads at this point. And they've questioned over 1,000 suspects. Each lead and suspect seems to be a dead end. Police state that they still receive several tips per month, and they chase them all down, but currently with no success. The only known evidence is that a few fibers were found on her body. No known evidence from the abduction site. Donna says during later interviews that Amber was also sexually assaulted. Ricky says that he never saw anything out of the ordinary that day. Amber Hagerman is now known as Arlington's Little Angel. So of course, when I look at a case like this and I consider the cases that we've reviewed on the channel here before, the first thing that pops in my mind is, what about DNA? We've actually have cases that are much older than this case where they've been able to pull DNA. I could only find a few references to DNA in this case, and this is basically all there is to it. Despite advances in the collection and use of DNA evidence, it's not clear whether such evidence is available in the unsolved mystery surrounding Amber Hagerman. So essentially the police are not commenting on if they have DNA or not. If they do have DNA, I'd be very surprised that we didn't hear about it, because more than likely they would be running that DNA against their databases. If this person had committed more assaults of this nature and was caught for one of those, there's a good chance that his DNA might be profiled already, but we're not hearing anything like that. So I'm really not certain if they do have a DNA profile. Of course, the next thing we want to look for are suspects, and if you do a search for suspects, you'll see a few names that kind of come up regularly. There was also a profile released by law enforcement. We're going to jump over to a thread here that has some details on that profile. 3 weeks after the abduction, authorities released a psychological profile hoping to smoke out the killer. The profile suggested the man was at least 25 and lived or worked near the spot where he dumped the body. Authorities revealed the girl was alive for 2 full days after she was abducted, which likely meant there was a crime scene rife with physical evidence somewhere in the Dallas area. Police theorized that something caused the killer to snap: an argument with a loved one, a rancorous domestic dispute, or the loss of a job. They said the killer's personality or appearance might have changed as a result of the trauma. Now, in terms of the names we hear, Here is one that is pretty prominent in the searches: Tarrant Adhan. Adhan made national and international headlines for unfounded rumors, as he was not in Texas when Amber was abducted. He did claim that he was the abductor and murderer of Amber Alert namesake Amber Hagerman. He is a convicted sex offender, and he is currently serving a life term in prison. More details on this. Notably, during this time that Amber went missing, Adhan was required to attend mandatory sex offender therapy sessions on a weekly basis in Tacoma, Washington. So I guess based on that assumption, they have ruled him out. Another name that comes up frequently is Bill N. Fry, but I think it's primarily because this blog has really been focusing on him as a suspect. I'll have a link to this blog down below, and here are a couple things that certainly raised my interest a little bit. Bill N. Fry in 1996 remodeled homes in Fort Worth and Arlington during the time of Amber Hagerman's death. Bill N. Fry rented an apartment in Arlington not far from where Hagerman was abducted. Bill N. Fry, according to relatives, had a master key to hundreds of HUD homes. He and his workers winterized these homes and remodeled them. There's some interesting information here. He apparently also had a black truck, but it's still in the area of being circumstantial. I'm not seeing anything in this blog in particular that is very strong from an evidence perspective to kind of point our finger in this direction. And there's a wrinkle with this blog because the person that publishes it, you can see here, Joey G. Daubin is the publisher, who speaks very strongly in his blog about his convictions of Bill Fry, and even that this is part of some larger sex trafficking organization. But Mr. Daubin here has some troubles of his own. Former Ellis County Observer publisher Joey Daubin gets 3 10-year sentences for sexual assault and indecency with a child. At first, when I bumped into this information, I was even wondering myself, well, if you were a suspect, wouldn't it be, if you were a certain type of suspect, I could see someone trying to sway law enforcement to look at someone else by maybe creating a blog and really making all these points about why it's that other person. However, I do believe that Mr. Daubin is too young to have been the culprit. He's only in his early 30s when this was published, and this was just in 2013. So I don't think it's him, but pretty interesting that he chose to write about those types of topics and then gets nailed on a charge like this. Another name that I've seen come up frequently is Dennis Bradford. This is actually a blurb from a thread at amwfans.com. That's for America's Most Wanted. Another theory I found was that Dennis Bradford may have been responsible. Bradford was the unidentified abductor of 8-year-old Jennifer Schuett. The problem is that Bradford killed himself in prison in 2010. The cases are somewhat similar. Once again, I have not been able to find, because there's so little physical evidence to talk about in this case, I haven't found anything that really, from an evidence perspective, points towards these men. What I do seem to find are people talking about people that could be the culprit based on what I consider largely circumstantial evidence. One of the other things that really bothers me about this case is we know that she had been cut, but we still don't have a very good explanation of by what. It could be that if they did some analysis on those wounds, that they could figure out what type of instrument was used to cut her. I mean, are we talking about a kitchen knife? Are we talking about some type of construction tool? And that might help narrow the field a little bit. But if they do have that information, authorities are certainly not coming public with it. And I've also seen a few threads that are referring to the person that found her body, Stuart Kocher, and was he ruled out? I can tell you that in the documentary that you'll see a link for down below, they have an interview with Stuart. He's the one that lived at the apartments that she was found behind, essentially, in the creek. First of all, he doesn't match the physical description. He's a pretty big guy. And outside of that, when you see him speak about her, I don't know. I'm just really not getting any feeling from him that he has anything to do with this. Once again, It's people looking at this case from the outside that are trying to find people that might, that could be possible suspects. And we certainly have seen cases before where the person that calls in that there's a body turns out to be the culprit. However, in this case, I personally don't feel that there's anything to that thought. This is a video clip from CNN that was actually from 2011, so this is just over 6 years old now, but at this time we get a comment from police about their thoughts and how they're handling the case currently.
Are there potential suspects out there?
Anytime we get a lead, we follow that all the way through, and there are suspects attached to those. Plus, there are people who we have looked at in the past that we'll continue to look at.
So there are still people you're looking at right now?
There are people that we continue to look at today.
Because of how famous this case is, I assume that there will always be some active detectives working on this case until it's solved. And if that's another 20 years, I still have a pretty strong feeling that's going to be the case because of Amber Alert. Because every time a child goes missing and there's an Amber Alert issued, those of us that do remember Amber Hagerman have this tickle in the back of our head about, oh, that's right, that little girl. What happened? We still don't know what happened after all these years. And I mentioned earlier there was a rush of media around the 20-year anniversary. This is a quick look at the Dallas news. We can see her family kind of busted up in the background of this photo here. 20 years later, police and relatives seek answers in death of Arlington girl who inspired Amber Alerts. Police have investigated 8,000 tips about Amber's abduction, but said that they are no closer to identifying a suspect than they were in 1996. At Tuesday's news conference, retired and current Arlington detectives said they hope someone will remember something about Amber's abduction and will come forward with that information. And that's something that always gets me about cases like this is, sure, there's the person that did it. First of all, have they gone on to do more crimes like this? Is it possible that they could be sitting in jail already? I think there's a chance of that. But outside of that, isn't there people around them? Isn't there someone around them that knows something about this case that can literally pick up a phone or send an email and change the existence of Amber's mother and Amber's brother so dramatically? I mean, literally give these people something that they've been searching for decades now. And if that person is out there, why aren't they acting? What is there to protect in all this? It really boggles my mind. And we do see cases where there are people that have information and they protect others. And in some cases, in all cases, I don't get it. There's this thing within me about being a human. I think many of us have considered the question, what would you do if you had a family member that you knew committed a crime? Would you let someone know about it or not? And for me, it all boils down to just being a human, just being a person. We need to do that. We need to allow justice to run its course. That doesn't mean that even if our family member did something, it doesn't mean we love them any less. It doesn't have any implications to do with how we feel about them. It's about making sure that our world is working in a way that is good, that is just good and simple for all of us. A world where children are killed and people get away with it, I think all of us can agree that's not the type of place we want to be in. So those people that are sitting out there, that are sitting on that information, that aren't picking up the phone, that aren't passing that information along, please just consider what type of world are you helping create by sitting on that info, by not passing it along. And another article from the 20th anniversary points out what Amber's mother has gone through since. Amber Hagerman's mother, Donna Williams, stands in a bedroom full of her daughter's memories. Williams has been hit with more than the average share of heartache in the years since her daughter's murder. 2 months after Amber's funeral, Williams's fiancé was killed in a car wreck. Her older sister was found dead at age 32 from a seizure disorder in 1998. Then, in the summer of 2009, her husband of 9 years died of a massive heart attack, and her father succumbed to cancer. Quote, "It's like I'm some sort of voodoo doll," Williams said. "It seems everybody that I love ends up dying." just really, really terrible. I feel horrible for what this woman has had to face, and for her to still not have the answers, I can't believe. There is a Web Sleuths thread on this I will also include down below, and as usual, there is a lot of information that's linked from here, so you can dive into here, chase some leads. There's also a very good profile done by, you know, they certify their members on Web Sleuths, and it says that this is a law enforcement officer, and he dives into a bit of a deeper profile than the one that I did on this video. I'm not quite sure where the information's coming from. That's why I didn't quite share it with you guys, but you can find it very easily if you just jump into this thread. This thread isn't giant. I think it's only 7 pages total, so certainly would be easy to find. And finally, if you don't do anything else with this case, but you want to look into it just a little bit more, I highly recommend WFAA's 1997 documentary, After Amber. There was a very interesting turn in that Amber and her family were actually featured on a news channel about people struggling, about people living on welfare and struggling to raise children. So they had a lot of footage of Amber, and it is somewhat haunting to watch it, but this piece in particular weaves together that story, weaves together all the great footage that they had, and then takes you through even some of the backstory of what her mother faced. And it's pretty much the story of her mother, what her mother goes through in terms of the tragedy, and then a little bit of the aftermath. It was produced, you know, only a year after, so unfortunately it doesn't go too far, but it is I think it's a very important watch if you're at all interested in this case, because it really gets you on the ground level with people that were there at the time. Like I mentioned before in the video, there was the interview with the person that found her. There's the person that saw her get abducted is also interviewed. Her grandfather is interviewed. Plenty of footage of her mom. And then even struggles that her mom is going through with her son, who is now seemingly having, you know, struggled with survivor's guilt at this time. Obviously, he's much older now. There are some interviews with him that have currently been kicking around. He still seems very reserved and very hurt about all this, as I imagine anyone would be. So this is going to be a little bit of a different brain scratch because this case is still completely unsolved. So just remember, in the description box below, contact information is there, not just directly to the detective that you would need to speak to, but if you want to submit tips anonymously, we have that information down below. So if you're out there with information, there's really no reason for you not to act. Let's just try to get the right thing done and try to help this family find justice. Find justice for this little girl that went through a very terrible ordeal, and in doing all that has helped turn this world into a little bit of a better place with this amazing Amber Alert system that we all have now. And I don't know. It's a heartbreaker. You know, that could be your daughter, that could be your sister, that could be your niece. It's so tragic on so many levels. So thank you guys so much for joining me here on today's Brain Scratch. And once again, a quick thank you to Amanda Denton for her excellent help researching this and pulling all this together. Plenty of links in the description box below if you want to continue researching this. And of course, we've got the comments so we can all talk about this case and maybe try to make some sense out of something that seems completely senseless. The truth is out there somewhere. I just hope, I really, really hope that it finds its way to Amber's family so they can have the justice that they really, really deserve. Take care, everyone. Have a nice weekend, and I'll see you back here on Monday on the Lord and Arts channel.